A new creation. Hello, Malcolm here. Welcome to the most recent episode in this series, A New Creation. Today, one model that may help us understand how God changes us. Now, in previous episodes, we've explored the nature of spiritual growth, that it's both practical and mystical. And this week, we're going to take a look at a model of spiritual growth put forward by Dallas Willard, something he called the golden triangle of spiritual growth. And by the way, before I go on, both he and I would be appalled if the model came across as a formula. So it's not a formula, it's a model, one of many, and a picture that kind of gives a description of it is in the show notes. 4 things to consider. Firstly, centered in the mind of Christ, not just on him, but in his mind. Why is this important? Well, it's because the mind is, in a sense, our center. How we think shapes everything, doesn't it? So we need to center in the mind of Christ if we are to see transformation. That way we learn to see things the way Jesus sees them. 1 Corinthians 2:16, who has known the mind of the Lord, but we have the mind of Christ. Perhaps this is what Paul is on about in Philippians 2:5 when he says to the Philippians he wants them to have the same mindset as Jesus Christ. In other words, not just to think like him, but to think in him, to have that heart-mind combo. So the first thing we aim for is to be centered in the mind of Christ. The second aspect of growth is the work of the Holy Spirit. It's God's power that transforms us, isn't it? Not just the way we think. In Romans 8, verse 6, the mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. Governed by, that's where the power is. In Romans 8:13, if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the misdeeds of the body, you will live. See, we can't do that in our own power. But by the Spirit's power, we can put to death the misdeeds of the body. So what does it mean for you to grow in the power of the Spirit? The mind of Christ, being in his mind and growing in the power of the Spirit. The third aspect of growth is the ordinary events of daily life. We're talking especially here about the hard stuff, and there's plenty of it in life, isn't there? God shapes you and me through the nitty-gritty of daily life. Philippians 3 verse 10. Paul said, I want to know Christ, yes, to know the power of his resurrection, that sounds good, and, he says though, participation in his sufferings. Becoming like him in his death. He wants to allow the sufferings in his life to help him be molded into more Christ-likeness. So therefore, even though we may mourn our painful experiences, and that's understandable and fine, we must look for the valuable growth opportunities that they contain. Is there something like that going on for you? And the final aspect of Willard's perspective on growth is the use of planned discipline to put on a new heart. What kind of discipline are we talking about here? The practices such as fasting and prayer and solitude and fellowship and worship and so on. Things that help us consciously invite God to transform us more into the likeness of Christ. We'll talk more about that in future episodes. So, to wrap up, let me ask you some questions. What helps you to be centered in the mind of Christ? How have you seen the Holy Spirit transform you so far by his power? What's going on in your life right now that could be a channel for God's growth work in you? And finally, which spiritual disciplines might help you to access God's power to your spiritual character? Next time, we will go on to look at another model of spiritual transformation. I'd be interested in your take on what I've shared today, so please email me, malcolm@malcolmcox.org. And between now and the next time, I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care, and God bless.